like to call this meeting of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners to order. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance. Hit roll call out, please.
Sarda. Here. Purdy. Here. Gross. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Hoff.
Here.
Ibom.
Here.
Mosier.
Here.
Mayor Hoffner.
Present.
City Manager Nelson.
Here.
City Attorney Detmer.
Here.
We have a quorum. We'll continue with our business. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. First of all, you have in front of your desk the minutes from the regular meeting of February 26th and the work session of February 26th.
Approve the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 4 under routine business, or number 3, excuse me, we'll do the scheduled bills first. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the bills.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the bills? Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Hoff.
Aye.
Ibom.
Aye.
Mosier.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Purdy.
Aye.
Gross. Aye. Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffner.
Aye. Motion carried. This time we have a proclamation for social workers. Social Work Month 2018. Social workers, leaders, advocates, champions. Whereas the social work profession is dedicated to enhancing the well-being of others and meeting the basic needs of all people, especially the most vulnerable in our society. Whereas social workers are present throughout our society, including the government, schools, universities, social service agencies, communities, the military, and in healthcare and mental health organizations. Whereas social workers are the largest group of suppliers of mental health services in the United States. Whereas social workers are present in times of crisis, helping people overcome issues such as death and grief, and helping people and communities recover from natural disasters such as floods and hurricanes. Whereas social workers help people in every stage of life function better in their environment, improve their relationship with others, and solve personal and family problems. Whereas social workers have pushed for decades to ensure rights of all, including women, African Americans, Latinos, people who are disabled, people who are LGBTQ, and various ethnic, cultural, and religious groups. Whereas social workers continue to engage and bring together individuals, communities, agencies, and government to help society solve some of the most pressing issues, including immigration reform, equal rights for all, affordable and good health care, and mental health care for all, and protecting the environment. Now therefore, I, Jake Hoffner, the Mayor of the City of Yankton, South Dakota, in recognition of numerous contributions made by America's 650,000 social workers, I proclaim the month of March 2018 as National Social Work Month and call upon all citizens of Yankton to join with the National Association of Social Workers and the National Association of Social Workers South Dakota in celebration and support of the social work profession. Thank you. We now will go on to number 5 on routine business, City Manager's Report. Manager Nelson.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the Commission. Couple of things to visit with you all tonight. Our next meeting is March 26th, and that will be Commissioner Knopf's last meeting, he's informed us. So that will be talked about a little bit in your consent calendar in case the group would like to get together and send him off properly. So again, speak for, I know at least the staff when I say it's been a pleasure and honor to work with you and learn from you on the City Commission, and we look forward to learning from you but not working with you when you're a judge, we hope. So wanted to bring that forward again as well. Looking for 2 commissioners to assist the Parks Department and some other folks from the community to serve on a very critical committee, the Welcome Banner Committee. If any of you have noticed lately, our summer red welcome banners have turned into sort of pink, not as welcoming banners. So was anyone interested in doing that? Otherwise we will pick staff, but if sometimes folks have an interest in those types of things, we had a committee for the Christmas decorations. So guys, don't everyone volunteer at once, but we can certainly have staff participate in that with community members. Okay, looks like we'll have staff talk with the community about that. We already have a few people, but we'll get some folks from the business community and send some community members at large as well. We have Officer Brandon Fry here today helping us out, so thank you, Officer Fry, for your hard work and coming here with us this evening. The Chamber has informed us that there will be a Chamber fly-in to Washington, D.C. They are looking at the date of April 23rd through the 27th, generally that week, with meetings being largely Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday all day, and then Thursday morning. So we're looking to see what commissioners may be interested in attending and traveling to D.C. for the fly-in. Because we have a meeting on that Monday, and we already know that Commissioner Knopf will not be with us, and Commissioner Minor has Seussical the musical that night that she's directing, so she will not be with us. We'll be down to 7 of you, so I'm inclined to say we should fly out Tuesday morning. So just looking to see if you guys want to discuss who wants to go, or how you want to handle that. I've heard from a couple folks, like, Amy Minor said she can't go due to school and things like that, but
We didn't go last year, but I assume we're going to limit it to 3 people.
typically we've sent 3. There has been, in the past, some years more have gone, but I think the last we discussed it, 3 was a sufficient number, I think, to cover things. We don't have any critical ask this year that I'm aware of, although I know the Chamber's working on some meetings.
Other than the prison.
Yep, Carmen is working on trying to get an audience with the Bureau of Justice to talk about the federal prison camp, but anything that's just of the interest of the city. So that would be kind of a community ask.
Could think about it and contact you.
Sure, if you could let us know, maybe by the end of the week, this week's. I know that the flights this close to April are getting expensive as our hotels, so let me know if you're interested, and then once I have who's all interested in going, if we have more than 3 that would like to go, we'll draw names or something like that to make it. Okay, so that's how we'll handle that. One other thing, in the spirit of Sunshine Week, and because somebody asked me to address how complaints are handled in our departments, specifically in the police department. So I want to share that with you all and with the public so they know that process. If somebody makes a formal complaint against an officer or one of the other individuals in the police department, the chief will assign an individual to investigate that, typically a lieutenant to investigate that. It is investigated then, and Ross is typically brought into that process as well. If there's wrongdoing found, appropriate action is taken with that employee. If there isn't any wrongdoing found, then the complainant is informed of that, and we follow up with the individual who complained. The exception to that is if we have a conflict of interest or if the complaint is criminal in nature. Somebody's saying, somebody's doing something unlawful, or if it would be involving a family member or there would be some kind of other conflict. If that's the case, we have the matter investigated by an outside agency. Sometimes that's the sheriff's office, sometimes that's DCI, or some outside entity to look into that so that we're not involved directly in the investigation. If the complainant is not satisfied with the follow-through or what was found, they have a couple of options. They can seek further action through the state's attorney and through their own legal recourse as well. And they also have, the ability to come back and discuss the matter further, to have it re-examined. So that's the process that we take with complaints in the police department, but really in all departments, the things are handled that way, and we have progressive discipline if necessary to deal with those types of things, depending upon the severity and nature of the complaint and if it's founded or not. So I just wanted to provide that information, I guess, in the spirit of Sunshine Week, making our processes transparent to everyone, and see if the commission had questions directly for Ross or I at this time.
So when an individual calls in, potentially with a complaint that they would like to file, they speak first with the chief of police?
It depends. So they can do that if they wish to start with the chief, but typically they would start with the on-duty supervisor, unless the complaint is with that individual. Then they may go to the patrol lieutenant, or if it's a detective where the complaints would involve a detective, they'd go to probably the supervisor of the detectives, which is Lieutenant Brand. But they can go directly to the chief as well. It ends up with the chief to have to be assigned, so it goes up the chain of command there, and then is assigned. Some things, if it's depending upon on the severity of the complaint as well. If it's Officer Al didn't get back to me and I asked him to, well, Al can talk to his sergeant, or the sergeant can talk to Officer Al and say, hey, you need to get back to Ms. Nelson and follow up. So it depends really upon the nature and severity of the complaint. If it's a formal complaint, a serious complaint that looks like needs to be investigated further and things need to be reviewed, typically it goes to the chief then to assign, or he'll conduct the investigation himself.
Are those initial conversations then, are they fairly formal and scripted? There's not a lot of informality to it? Essentially, if you call in, you have a complaint, it's more, here's how I'll walk you through the process of doing that? You understand what I'm asking?
I don't understand what you're asking, but I'll try to respond anyway. I think we ask for the complaint in writing. So if somebody calls up and, wants to talk about an issue or a perception or something they have, that becomes an informal conversation. I would guess, and my inclination is that we remind folks, if you have a formal complaint, get it down in writing and get it to us and we'll look through it. That's how my understanding of how things are handled, and that's how if there's a complaint comes to me, I always say please get something in writing so I can pass along to the appropriate person and we can follow through that way. So we do have that formal process, but if it's an informal conversation, and sometimes it's a conversation about, do I have a complaint here, or is that the nature of business? Sometimes it's having that conversation to even help the individual vet out, is this really a question or is it a complaint, or how do we handle this topic?
Maybe you could highlight the citywide cleanup again one more time for the public.
I'd love to highlight the citywide cleanup. Citywide cleanup begins Monday, April the 2nd. You can begin to put things out on the curbside on March 24th. I'm closing my eyes when I really have to think hard. All of the materials and items that you can put out on the curb are listed, and the manner in which you can place them are listed and provided for you on our website. So please take a look there. We'd like you to separate your items into categories as to what they are. Avoid any items that we do not pick up. And then also make sure that your carts are separate from your materials so that it's easy for our folks to pick them up and not damage your roll carts. So everyone can participate in that. And we also have free drop-off going on towards the end of March at the transfer station. Beginning on Saturday, I heard from the crowd.
All right. Well, thank you. Any more questions for Manager Nelson?
I have a quick question about the cleanup. There's a couple times a year where we do ask the public to clean up, not just for the citywide cleanup where you can put your stuff out there on the curb, but also when it comes time to have a rummage go on here in town. How can we have those two cleanup kind of opportunities be more closely aligned, like they're essentially back to back, where, you know, our citizens go through the motions of rounding up all the stuff that needs to be cleaned up in their house, have it for a rummage, followed by a citywide cleanup for the stuff that doesn't sell, essentially. You would only have to clean up maybe twice a year.
So combining the citywide rummage sale week with the cleanup week?
Yeah, it probably won't make sense to combine them, but to probably
Put
have
them
them happen.
back to back.
Right.
We haven't done that. That's certainly something we can talk about. I think it might be the Preston Dakotan, or perhaps it's the chamber that organizes the citywide rummage. I'm not sure on that. We've always done cleanup, pickup in the spring for a couple reasons. One, spring cleaning, but also it's a time where we're kind of in between snow removal and getting really heavy into road construction, so it's a time when we have time to do it. But if that's something the commission in general would like us to take a look at, I don't even know when the rummage sales occur. 'Cause May.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on, this is the time and place we allow public appearances. So if anyone from the public would like to address the commission on an item that's not on the agenda, please come forward. Okay. Moving on to consent items. We have 7. If there's no objections, we'll combine them all, and 5 of which are a possible quorum event, and 2 establishing a public hearing. Number 1 for March 15th, CBB presentation, possible quorum. Number 2, possible quorum, March 27th. And number 3, April 5th for a commission forum, possible agenda again, or possible quorum. And March 26th for Commissioner Knopf. And then one more on March 26th for interchange forum at noon at Minerva's. And there's 2 public hearing established, one for March 26th, establish a hearing for a special one-day license for the Steve Drotzman, and the other is a public hearing established for the sale of alcoholic beverages on March 26th for Boomers.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, the consent agenda. Any discussion? Anybody from the audience? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Moving on to old business. This is a time and place for a public hearing, memorandum 18-43 for the rodeo and alcoholic beverages.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Mybom,
Aye.
Moser,
Aye.
Sarda,
Aye.
Fertig.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffner.
Aye, motion carried. Number 2 under old business is this is a time for a public hearing, consideration of memorandum 18-47 regarding ordinance 1004, amendment to chapter 17 of the city code of ordinances.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Moser,
Aye.
Sarda,
Aye.
Fertig.
Aye.
Gross. Aye. Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom,
Aye.
Mayor Hoffner.
Aye, motion carried. We have one more public hearing tonight under old business. Is memorandum 18-52 to consider ordinance 1005.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Sarda.
Aye.
Burdick.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Moser.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffner.
Aye, motion carried. Moving on to new business, we have number 1 is an agreement with the Boys and Girls Club Memorandum 18-44 in regards to bus storage.
I'll move the memorandum.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Burdick.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Moser.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffner.
Aye, motion carried. Number 2 under new business is 2018 Bridge Reinspection Memorandum 18-45 and Resolution 18-13.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Just had a question. I want to make sure the numbers were correct, that it's about a $5,000 fee to have the inspection done. So we are 1,000 of that.
That's correct.
Okay, it just seems like a relatively small amount for inspecting all the 11 bridges, but, and culverts, so just want to make sure.
Your name, please. Any more questions? Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Gross.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Moser.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Burdick.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffner.
Aye, motion carried. Moving on to number 3 under new business, the Election Board Memorandum 18-46.
So moved.
Second.
Has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Moser.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Burdick.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffner.
Aye, motion carried. Number 4 under new business is the mayor appointment to Consolidated Board of Equalization, Memorandum 18-42. Who would like to step forward? We usually take 3 and an alternate, is that correct? And who's ever not done it, recommend if you do it, or whoever can help out.
I'll just say I wish I could. I'll be in Sioux Falls, unfortunately, that day for a small business administration event.
Anybody else?
Wouldn't that depend also, isn't this during the trip to
Yeah.
DC?
I was just going to say, Mayor, whoever is,
Yeah, we're gonna
I also have to be
probably-
back on Friday, so if I'm flying with the group, make sure we're returning Thursday night. So we may miss a little bit on Thursday for those events, for anyone going. And you'll have to be back Thursday night if you're on this board.
I think we're probably going to have to discuss that over and volunteer for the trip first, and then we'll work with the remaining. Do we do that, or do you need action? Not yet.
Eventually you need action,
Yeah.
but you don't need it.
We can do it next, okay. Because it looks like we're going to have to sort this out. It's going to be a little bit of schedule checking and calling and emailing and find out who can volunteer for both areas, okay?
I'll be on the other side of the aisle this time. I'll be out in the audience protesting.
Good, then maybe I should volunteer. It'd be fun.
I'll be your power of attorney.
All right. To be determined. Number 5, request for camping in Riverside Park, Memorandum 18-49 for the kayak event. I don't know if anybody's here for that, but.
Move
what
to
a
allow
great event.
camping.
Second.
Moved and seconded. It's just an awesome event. I think it's just been really good for our community, especially all the kayaking events. So hopefully everybody has anybody want to talk about that, or nobody's here, right, for the kayak? Darwin, a kayak?
I know if Jarrett were here, he would thank us for considering this request.
All right. Any more questions or discussion?
I think they need 3 volunteers to also camp with them, so.
Is that April 27th? Well, the 3 left, there's 9, so 3, 3, and 3. We should be good. All right. We, is it moved to motion? Moved and seconded? Roll call, please.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Moser.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Fertig.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffman.
Aye, motion carried. Number 6 is under new business, a mower purchase for Fox Run Golf Course, memorandum 18-50.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Mybom.
No.
Moser.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Fertig.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffman.
Aye, motion carried. Number 7 is the raising of delinquent utility fees, memorandum 18-51 and resolution 1814. I think we can have some discussion on this.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
How will the range work? Are you just gonna, is that just saying that you'll be able to tier those up over the next so many years?
No, the range is for you to choose
Yeah, we choose.
tonight to set these at.
Okay.
It was,
I think what might be helpful is, let's just play out a quick scenario if we could. Because I didn't quite understand this either until I actually had to physically go in and pay my utility bill. Had never done that before. But Al, if you could, so I paid my utility bill here today, March 12th. If I did not pay my bill today, it says, after 3/12, pay an amount that's $10 more than what I was originally billed for. So in that case, $10 fee. What happens if I don't pay that next $10, or excuse me, what happens if I don't pay my bill after however long? What's the next consequence in line?
the next date is the 25th. If it's not paid by the 25th, you get a door knocker, which is another $10 fee. And that gives you basically 24 hours to stop down and pay or arrange a schedule of payment, sign an agreement. If it's still not, you're shut off. Then some of the other fees take effect, and that's the $45 current fee to turn back on.
And that fee kicks in after a month. Is that
Well,
right?
it's, again, the 10th is the first due date, 25th is the next due date.
Okay.
And it's, the shut off is basically a day or two after that, depending on how it falls on the week, stuff like that.
So in that case, we'll just say April 20th comes around. Total implication for me is my original bill amount plus $10, plus $10, plus $45.
If you're shut off.
If I'm
before-
shut
yeah,
off,
yeah.
yep. And in that case, if I want to, once again, get water, I will have to pay $65 total, in addition to my
Plus your
original
current amount due, correct.
Okay, so when we're talking about a range, it's really for those first two times where I haven't taken advantage of the opportunity to reconcile my bill. $10 here, $10 the second go round, and then I suppose too, we're talking about the $45 fee.
Yep.
I don't know. I can't see how raising fees is going to bring people to pay their bill earlier. These mostly folks have a challenge the way it is, and I don't know that raising is going to solve anything, but
So
Hurt-
Al, can you
hurt them
tell us
further.
too, back in the memo, you talked about 2007, that was the last time rates were raised from $5 to $10. What really happened though with folks who had not been on auto pay, for instance? That raising of rates, what did that do to encourage folks hopping onto the auto pay system, which is a free way of having your bills pay automatically?
I can't recall the exact influence it had on the auto pay. We didn't have the bill pay online, of course, at that time. We've always had, or for as long as I've been here, we've had the ability to have the ACH transfer. Anytime you start raising fees, you usually see an increase in that. For what it's worth, when we went from the $5 to $10, we had about a 4 to 6 month period where, in addition to the large number of complaints about the fee going up, it affects the people that do pay late seem to pay on time a little bit quicker, but it was about a 4 to 6 month period, and then it basically is non-existent. It's not a penalty to them. They choose to for whatever reason, you know, and again, you'd have to talk to all the people that are involved on what their choice is or why, but it had about a 4 to 6 month effect of lessening how many were late, and then it was back to the normal amounts again. Normal amounts, the first late notice ranges from about $370 to $420 on a normal month. Once in a great while it's less, once in a great while more, but consistently between $370 and $420 get that first $10 fee.
And can you also talk about the discretion that your office is empowered to have in a situation where an individual has missed their due date, they have not paid, and maybe it's once and forever, they've never been late before. Can you talk a little bit about the discretion that your office has and will continue to have if we do adjust rates here tonight?
The office has the ability to waive the rate, you know, and we look at historical. If somebody this is their first or second time, you know, and they've got a reason why they were late, we'll waive it. We also have the ability to set up agreements where we typically want an agreement to be paid within 30 days. So we'll set up an agreement where they can either come in and make payments, but by the end of 30 days, they have to be current again. We allow people to do that.
And is this proposal coming forward just because we haven't raised them since 2007, or are we trying to make money, or where's the
It was
reasoning
a
behind
request
bringing
from
this
a
forward?
commissioner who
I understand that,
had
but I guess I'm
realized
asking
that,
then the reasoning behind that.
Any more comments or questions?
So the, turning the water back on, how much time does that entail?
You know, it's a service call, and it's usually 2 people. We almost always send 2 people out. I shouldn't say always, but typically we like to send 2. It's a matter of 5 to 10 minutes. But that's physically turning it on. I mean, it doesn't involve how much time is spent in office time setting up, making the calls, aligning the workers to go out and do it.
I just think we need to think about what's the philosophy here. You know, it doesn't seem like we're covering any costs necessarily. This is just supposed to spur people to pay their bill. That's what the fee is there for.
Well, and it's also to cover some costs. But I will be honest, you know, if we had no late payments, I don't think we're going to reduce staff by that. You know, we'll find other things for them to do. Is there some time spent on this? Yeah, it depends on how many are late, especially the second time around, and further how many are shut off. But the philosophy has been in the past by the commission to make sure that that extra expense is not passed on to you and I and everybody else that pays on time. It's a burden to the person that creates that extra expense that they have to pay a little bit more. All of this goes into our revenue stream and is taken into account when we look at rates. So,
Any more questions?
I don't know, but if we are having 400 a month that are delinquent, it would seem to me that they need a greater incentive to pay on time than a $10 penalty. That's not enough.
and again, I did point out that, you know, the finance officer's listserv, what a listserv is finance officers are all involved in a chat type situation where we can send emails to each other. This comes up 2 to 3 times a year that people say, where's your city at on their fees? I didn't do a new one on this, but it's typically around $20 on the average. There's some as low as $5, there's some as high as $30 to $40. Again, the typical average is around 20 now.
So, Chris, I interrupted you before. I think you wanted to say something, but I wanted to bring up just an email exchange that you and I had. You had made the point of, and this kind of goes to your original inquiry, Commissioner Knopf, having a, whatever that new initial rate might be. You know, right now it's $10, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 20. Like 20 apparently is the average according to Al's listserv. Maybe considering having a second fee that is a step higher. Can you elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, when we first started talking about it, everybody runs into things. People are late, and I'm habitually late, not because I don't want to pay. It's just busy. So I do pay a significant amount of fees of my time. But my thought, if we're going to do it, I think we should do it more of a, and address it as a, whether you raise the first $10 up or not. If you're going to raise it very minimally. The second, the door knocker fee, double it. If it's, or a significant higher amount from the first time. So you got someone that's habitually late, whatever, if as long as they're, maybe that's just their makeup. Maybe they're okay spending the $10 on it. Maybe not. But it's the people that that take, that are extend that out as far as they possibly can. I think would address it a lot more. I also think at a certain point you probably need to figure out some kind of a fee. 2 or 3 times a year, it's a fee. If you're late more than 3 times a year, if you're late 6 months out of 12, I think it needs to be addressed a different way. But that's all something that can be discussed down the road. But I agree. I think it's time to raise some fees. My personal opinion, I think, looking at the ranges, I think if we're gonna do it, I think we just start at the bottom of the range. I don't want to get too terrible crazy and create a big uproar. But you start at the bottom of the range, and if we need to adjust down the road, then we can address it then.
So, we've started raising water rates pretty significantly in the last several years to pay for the water treatment plant. Has that had a pretty big effect on the number of late fees we're seeing?
Not really, no.
So I don't want to cut off any other commissioner here, but I do want to just say that it was actually in a separate conversation that I was having with Lauren from United Way. I don't know how this subject came up, but she had brought up an individual in a service who I wasn't even aware of, and that's Sylvia from Lutheran Social Services. And Lauren had connected me with her simply because I think she has a service that is, I think, invaluable for the people who I think we really want to try and address here with these rate adjustments. And that's, like Chris mentioned, the people who have a habitual issue. And perhaps this is an opportunity. Nobody wants to raise rates just for the sake of raising rates. Yeah, it's been 10 years. But at the same time, if there are folks who are having habitual issues, then especially considering that Al's office has discretion, which I think is very important because every situation is different, but perhaps we should look at more, not even formalizing a relationship with the Lutheran Social Services, but let's take this opportunity to understand what it is that they do. And I don't want to give too much away, but I was pretty blown away at how much that service would cost people who have a habitual problem, perhaps like Commissioner Fergert here. But again, I don't want to cut off any commissioners, so if you have anything else that you wanted to add to this conversation, I just wanted to make sure that we are also respectful of Sylvia's time for coming to share with us tonight.
Come on forward, we'll listen. We'll definitely like to hear what you have to say. Thanks, Sylvia. Is that mic on, Dave?
I got it.
Okay, so I work for Lutheran Social Services. I'm a credit and housing counselor and educator. So the credit counseling part of my job is what I think would be most advantageous to your so-called repeat offenders. We do budget counseling with people, try to identify the financial issues that are causing them to be past due on things, help them to find options to remedy that. In my experience, utilities are pretty close to the top of the list for people. So if they are missing utilities, there's probably an underlying issue that is more than just being busy or other things. And there may be resources available to those people that they're not aware of. We have an informal relationship with another organization in town, and what they do is that if they have clients that are habitually past due, if they will come in and do a credit counseling session, then they get a credit on their fee, or they get some sort of, not complete forgiveness, but a little bit of consideration for the fact that they're trying to work on whatever the problem is. The fees for our services are fairly low. It's $30 for a one-time fee to be seen as many times as needed within 90 days. If a client is past due on utilities, however, we don't charge the fee because HUD doesn't allow us to. So anyone that is past due on their water bill could come and have essentially free counseling sessions to help them work out their budget issues and figure out, do they have other options, what's going on, to try to get them to a point where they are able to pay up to date. Just on an observation from what Commissioner Ferdig said about an escalated sort of penalty if they're late more often during the year than the average person, I kind of agree with that, even though that's a little maybe counterintuitive to what I do for a living. People take care of what's important, and you have to make it important if you want them to take care of it. And water's important, definitely, but like I said before, with utilities being behind, it's typically other issues that are escalating that for them. It's usually not just that they don't want to pay, it's that they can't for whatever reason. And whether it's whatever the other issues are in their life, they may not have the ability or the knowledge to help them figure that out on their own. And that's what I do. That's why I'm there, is to help people with those kinds of things. I don't know if that answers all your questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we should also point out, Al had illuminated this for me as well. So I actually worked for about a year out of college at the First National Service Center here in town, and helping people with, they're behind on their credit cards, for instance.
Right,
That
right.
bad debt can really impact your credit report.
Absolutely.
Now here with the city, when we're talking about our utility bill, let's say a person does get a month behind, we're talking about $65 worth of fees on top of what they owe us, but we don't have a bad debt situation. It's not going to harm a person's credit report. They are going to have to reconcile what they owe, not only in the fees, but what they are being charged for that month's bill before we can never turn it back on again.
Right.
But that's a different relationship than a consumer might have with a credit card company, for instance.
Right. One suggestion I might offer for consideration is that, let's say that someone has been disconnected and now they owe the 65 or whatever it ends up being that you decide on tonight. If they would agree to come and see a credit counselor, then maybe you would give them an extra month to pay that arrears, a little more time. Because again, when people are in that situation, I understand that fees are trying to get people to be more proactive, but if they're already in the hole, adding a $65 fee on top of it is not, they may want to pay, but it really just exacerbates the problem. If you were to say, well, we understand you're struggling, here's a business card of someone who can maybe help you. If you go have a counseling session, we'll allow you to pay half of the late fee this month and half of the late fee next month, to give them a little bit of relief, but still show that they have to be responsible and take care of it. So not stretch it out over months and months, but just give a little consideration to them when they make an effort to solve the larger problem.
So Sylvia, you bring up an interesting point saying that, which made me think of this. So in kind of all the work that you've done, do you believe raising fees would get people to pay their account?
No, maybe some, but in most cases, especially repeat offenders, most of the time it's not that they don't want to, it's that they can't, for whatever reason, in my experience.
Thank you, Sylvia. Any more questions or discussions, or?
I guess, you know, someone did make a motion, it was seconded, but it probably needs to be cleared up.
There's nothing really to motion right now. The blanks are
Okay,
empty.
so it wasn't done?
No, it's actually open for somebody to make a motion and point out, if they would like, to point out these precise changes, if any. So
Yeah,
we really-
and I would just say, I know I've heard, you know, let's really throw down the hammer and then let's take baby steps. I'm thinking that $65, I don't think any of us want to like double that implication. We don't want $130 liability for these folks out there. And again, that's worst case scenario. But let's just say if we put it out as $100, so we did $20 for the first time that you go past due, $30 for when you go past due the second time, and then just leave that $45 as a disconnect fee, put that out as just $50. So it's an even $100 implication. And I'm just thinking, and I think you might have mentioned something like this, you were on South Dakota's Focus SDPB program. I kind of wonder about when folks have round numbers in mind, like, you know, a round number rather than, you know, something in some sense. Like, it's $100. This is what it's going to take in order for you to reconcile the situation with the city. The city's not charging this off as bad debt, but if you want your water turned on again at your house, let's try and tackle this $100 at some point as part of your budgeting. So I'm just throwing that out there as an example to consider.
Okay, we're about to back up a little bit because really we had a motion that really didn't, it just for the resolution, which is just a bunch of blank in it. So I think we're going to back up and entertain a motion specific to the blanks if someone would like to do that. If not, it's okay too. So somebody would like to make a motion that and fill in these blanks because we have 5 of them, or 5 blanks, yeah. So if we don't have specifics on that, we really can't go anywhere. It can be the same, so if someone would like to jump in there and take a stab at it, and we can, or leave it as is.
Is this something that, I hate to throw out committee, but do we need to have a committee look at this and try to figure out what we're trying to accomplish, and if we want to work in a counseling component to potentially direct these people in a place that can help them with their underlying issues, so we can do that. I just have discomfort with increasing rates right now just because we haven't done it in a long time.
And I think you bring up a good point, though, because we should make sure, Al, you know, with what Sylvia has explained, her organization's free services, can you already kind of get a sense if you know, you try and formalize a situation with Lutheran Social Services in your office? I mean, you could already do that, really, this week if you really wanted to, but how would that typically play out? You get a conversation from a customer who comes in, they're 25 days late, and they want you to waive the fees. Now, it's maybe their 3rd or 4th time that this has happened in the last year. How do you integrate a free service like Sylvia's into your compromise with these folks?
Quite honestly, you're just creating more work for staff. I'm not against it. It's your choice. You know, if you want us to work with them, we're not typically in the social work business, but I'm at your mercy. I mean, I'm not telling you how and why you should do this. You tell me. I work for you.
I'm wondering is it a committee that's needed, or does staff just need to look at the fees and look at what it costs to send a crew out, what it costs to generate warnings and those types of things, and make a suggestion to the commission? because you're talking about, is it gonna be $50 or $55? And I would think what's important is to send 2 people out to a location, all the phone calls, all the follow-up, the paperwork is gonna be, you know, worth $60 versus $45. And, you know, is the $10 versus $20 upfront important, or is that not so important? I don't know that a committee, you know, when you start talking about, well, let's have referrals to social services, and thinking, well, I mean, is that really what staff is supposed to be doing? I understand the good, what you're trying to do, and I think it's honorable, but I'm not sure that that really is the city's function, other than having cards and suggesting people get help. And if the discretion is there, I'd say use whatever discretion you have to help people get their bill paid and do better with their life. But I just think giving a referral and not having some big list of rules of, okay, well, we're going to go under this route, this route, this route, or this route. I mean, it's a fee. When it's all said and done, it's either going to be $10 or $15. And I think there should be some justification. Otherwise, just don't raise it. If the justification, if it doesn't sound like the incentive is going to be there by raising the fee to get someone to pay. So then why raise it? To me, then the only reason to raise it is because it takes staff time. You're taking a crew from somewhere and taking them out to a location, and even a 10-minute call is really a 30 or 40-minute call, because they're leaving and then getting back and trying to get back into what they were doing. So,
Sylvia?
I just have something I'd like to add. As you're deciding what to do as far as referrals or whatever, if we think about what's the long-term goal, if the long-term goal is to reduce delinquencies and get clients, as we call them, customers, to where they're past due less often, like Commissioner Knopf said, it doesn't have to be a complicated process. It can be a simple referral. But if we're thinking about as far as staff time that it would take to do referrals, or have a system that would allow some sort of consideration for going to counseling, you know, hopefully eventually that would offset any expense of sending out service people to turn off water, staff time tracking down delinquent accounts. If we can get them to a point where they're not delinquent anymore, then that in the long term might save some time and money for the city as well.
And real quick, I should ask, priorities when you're sitting down with folks, because I just did explain that when it comes to people's credit reports, very different when it's a bill from the city that's past due compared to a credit card. Is it fair to say you would probably tell people you should prioritize this debt over here first?
Housing utilities are always top of the list, always, because those are, in my world, what we call the needs. Those have to be covered. Credit cards are important, but they don't feed your children and keep you clean and, you know, keep your house warm, those kinds of things. So they are down the list compared to housing issues. So housing's always first.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to fill in the blanks, and we can yay or nay it. I mean, it's one allowed. We got to start someplace.
Okay.
Number 1, delinquent fee I'd raise to 20. Turning back water I'd raise to 50. Number 3, the hourly service I'd go to 50 and 60. 50 for normal, 60 for other. Number 4, $30. Number 5, $50.
Second.
Excuse me, just read the last two again.
All right.
30 and
Repeat that for
50.
Al. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Al, do you want to read that back?
The number 1, the delinquent account late fees would go from $10 to $20.
Double, okay.
Number 2, turning water back on if they've been shut off would go from 45 to 50. Number 3, the hourly service calls during regular service call or during regular working hours, turning back on would go from 45 to 50. For out of normal working hours, it would go to 60. Turning water on a normal basis, that's anytime anybody comes in to get water turned on and or change the name on an account, you know, because somebody's house sold or somebody else is renting it now, that would go from 25 to 30. And then the hydrant meter fees, that would go from $25 a month to 50. And that one sounds like a large increase, but I would encourage that one. What the hydrant meter is a meter that we rent out, so to speak, for that $25 for contractors mostly. And it's getting to be where that's not a deterrent for them, so they'll come in and get a meter at the beginning of summer or beginning of the building season, keep it for 6 months, and paying, because the $25 is, they're passing that on somebody else anyway eventually. And for what it's worth, we're starting to get so many of them that now we have to order more meters. We have to have more on hand to hand out, so we need to make that a little stronger. But again, that was way off on a list there, so.
Okay, any questions?
See, something like that would make sense for us to raise rates, but, you know, raising it from 10 to 15 on the first time, you know, that doesn't seem like that's gonna solve a problem if that's what we're trying to do, but to be honest, the hourly rate, I'm fine with that, but I don't like the initial $10 one. I don't think that's gonna solve anything.
Yeah, that was going to be my recommendation, is I'd vote no if we leave it at the $20 rate. I don't feel comfortable doubling that rate.
Any more discussion? It's also amendment possibility if you'd like, anyone. And we should probably clarify the motion, because there was a motion made. Charlie, would yours be a substitute or amendment to the original motion?
Mine would have to be an amendment to the
Right.
first motion.
Right, so you're amending the first motion. Is there any discussion on the amendment? So the original motion is just to vote on this memorandum with the blanks. The second one is amending it with those blanks that Charlie indicated. So if there's no other amendments or any discussion, any more questions? Roll call on the amendment.
Mosier,
No.
Sarda,
No.
Burdick,
Aye.
Gross,
Aye.
Johnson,
No.
Knopf,
No.
Mybom,
Aye.
Mayor Hoffner.
No. Failed.
Motion fails. 3-5.
Motion failed. Thank you for the discussion.
The amendment failed.
The amendment, now we'll vote on the main motion.
Ready?
The main motion is basically it failed, so they failed through.
I'm gonna say that, do they need to withdraw it as a point of order?
Yeah, we really didn't, yeah, we didn't.
I'm
have-
sorry, because the amendment failed, the motion was blank, don't we really need to withdraw the motion?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The original motion was Mr. Mybom first and Knopf second.
I did hear a commissioner mention, though, that initial fee change that we were suggesting would be better if it were slightly lower, more than 10, slightly more than. So I would like to wait in case somebody would like to offer an amendment now.
So I'll amend, can I amend my original motion? Is that allowed? So I'll amend it so that the first fee is $10, and then the remaining fees, as Commissioner Gross had set out.
Second.
Okay, we're voting on the amended motion. The first motion again, amendment. It's gonna get me yet. All right. Any discussion on that? Al, you want to read back again?
I can.
Please do.
First fee is leaving it at 10. Second fee is going from 45 to 50. The third fee is going from 45 to 50. The fourth fee is going to 60. The fourth one is turning water on would go from 25 to 30. And the fifth one, the hydrant meter, would go from 25 to 50.
Any discussion?
So the $60 stays the same, $60 per hour for other times? Okay.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, roll call on the amendment.
Sarda.
Aye.
Ferdig.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Mosier.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffner.
Aye, motion carried. Now we'll vote on the motion. Roll call, please,
As amended, Ferdig.
as amended.
Does that mean aye? Aye? I'm confused. Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Mosier.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffman.
Aye, motion carried. Moving on to number 8 under new business, pipeline license with Burlington Northern Santa Fe Memorandum 18-53.
Move the memorandum.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
So this is for the trail that's running out around Fox Run, all that's been approved by us already. We have the funding.
Yes, this is part of the TAP trail for 31st Street and West City Limits Road. And this is just a license agreement to put a pipe in the drainage ditch in the railroad right away that the trail can go over. And there'll be another agreement like this for the actual trail crossing. We have not received that yet.
This isn't holding up the trail or anything. This is just part of our paperwork to clean it up.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions or discussion? Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Trudy.
Aye.
Gross. Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Mosier.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffman.
Aye, motion carried. Moving on to number 9 under new business. Pine Street Bridge bid results. Discussion memorandum 18-54. Maybe you can explain before there's action, Amy, what happened.
Sure. As you know, the state held its bid opening for the Pine Street Bridge, which came in roughly $335,000 above the engineer's estimate. So that leaves us with a little bit of a question as to whether or not we want to proceed. We do right now have an award of $854,904.60 for the bridge improvement grant funding. The city's portion of the project was to be $645,936 for that project. So that would change our portion of the project. It's not if a project with the state comes in over the estimate amount, they don't offer their share of the grant agreement for that amount. That's on the onus of the project owner, which in this case is the city. So we're looked a lot at the 506 because we've changed a lot in the 506, as you know, with 8th Street and some of the changes we made there, and Walnut Street and the project that we're doing there. We do have room in the 506 to go ahead with the project and the additional amount. We'll have to move some projects and push some projects, and that's not unusual. If we are going to push projects, this is a good year to do that because engineering has their hands full with the large amount of big infrastructure projects. So not ideal, but we think this is the best shot of getting this project done. Consequences if we don't move forward is we could likely lose the grant funding. We could ask them to rebid the project, and they may or may not do that. Could be even more expensive than the initial bid. So in talking with the DOT, we both feel that this is a good bid and we should go forward. So I'm happy to answer questions, or Adam can answer questions to the best of our abilities.
And it has to be approved by the state later this week, correct?
The state is meeting to discuss this project on March 15th, I believe, and they'd like an understanding from the commission as to where they're at, where you guys are at in terms of that, if you're inclined to move forward or not. They're the actually ones that award the project or not. It's not something that you guys award.
So I understand if we push a project out, say like, did you say 26th Street, or what does that affect us like in 3 years down the road? I know it's hard to see that far in advance sometimes, but we're obviously going to push something else out then, or is that something we can absorb in the next 2 years?
Right. So just in looking at the project slated for this year, we think 26th Street should be the one that gets pushed this year, as well as a couple other smaller road construction projects. typically, we don't complete all the projects that we budget in the 506, so that's not unusual. And that street is in condition that it could wait another year. So certainly, anytime things cost more than we anticipate, somewhere down the line in the 506 you feel that. But I think, the alternative here is not good either. I couldn't tell you another scenario of what we do here if you weren't willing to move ahead with this project. So it's just a matter of how it's going to impact us.
On this, and maybe this is probably for Adam, it says the higher bid amounts may be due to the added architectural and historical features. That wasn't something that was taken into account when we, because that's kind of been in the picture for a while, hasn't it?
It was, but it's just the uniqueness of the historic style railing and the uncertainty that the contractor may have working with that railing, since it's not a typical item on their usual bridge projects.
Well, and we added it, didn't we?
Yes, we asked to have that added.
So I've always gone into this not questioning the need for a bridge there. What if we ask something really crazy? Do we need a bridge there?
Oh, my
A
goodness.
school. There's a school there.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Can we rewind this,
I
Dwayne?
use the street, and so I see who's on it, and I'm going, if you told those parents they've got to go down to Burley to access Webster School because there's no bridge at Mulberry or Peacock or Pearl, so it's the Pine Street. Most of them come up and down Pine Street. So do we need? Yes, we need the bridge. Thank
I
you.
couldn't remember how many we had along there, but
Well, you've got one on Douglas and one on Capitol. But again, from Pine Street to Burley, there aren't any.
So it would be nice if we had had the opportunity to maybe reevaluate the scope of this project, but it does feel like we're very compressed now for time, like we got to make a decision. We don't have time to reevaluate, right? If we want to include those historical attempts at features. So with that in mind, I just really do want to understand, I'm not trying to place any blame here, but we just see these numbers here now, and then we got to decide because the 15th is right around the corner.
Yeah,
Is
and we
there
just
any
got.
reason why is there any way we could have avoided having to wait this long to see these numbers?
Well, we've been waiting a couple years. We had hoped that the project could have gotten bid out last year and didn't. When we're the owner and it's a state-run bid, we're a little bit at the mercy of their timetable. We just got the numbers. Wednesday or Thursday? Thursday, when they held their bid opening. Their bid opening was postponed because of a weather situation earlier in the week. So they have a commission meeting on the 15th, and then they have another one, I think, in early April. That's not gonna change the numbers. I think the issue is they have to award within the month of, they have 30 days like we do to bid out. We could ask them to hold off until their next spring meeting if that falls within their timeline. I don't know that we're going to know anything different than we do today, other than, we could talk about it more. So we're not trying, we tried to give you guys the numbers as soon as we had them, and we just came in under our agenda wire to put it on this agenda.
I think we should also note, though, our numbers for West City Limits Road were 300,000 or 400,000 under. Our numbers for 8th Street were 300,000 or 400,000 under. So this is the first bid we've had over. I'm going, okay. I mean, that happens.
And unfortunately, this is a project that doesn't look like what anybody is happy about how it looks. When we had the individuals here from the Historical Society, two different historical, they looked at the pictures up on the big screen like we all did, and it's like, it's not really historical looking. And I got the sense too that we as commissioners, it's like, okay, well, let's spend the $60,000, that's what we thought at the time, and let's at least attempt to make it look like the Pine Street Bridge does now. It was a really tough thing to do, and I will just tell you, I feel really conflicted about now having to really overspend to make it look like what we saw up on the big screen. It's a compromise that nobody really seemed happy with.
Yeah, and the commission could ask them to rebid the project without that element, but that'd have to go all the way back through the process, just so everyone's understanding, because we kind of lose control of that process when it's a state project. So that wasn't an alternate, that was added on. It was something in the design of the bridge, is my understanding. So they'd have to rebid, and
Yeah, they would have to redesign the railing edge along the outside to replace the spindled historic railing.
right. And we
Because
But
it
we
is,
saw that before the spindling was added, right? We saw a version of this bridge before some historical, features were added.
not in its final design state.
I
though.
see, okay, I'm sorry.
So they would have to go back, create new plans, new drawings. It'd probably push it to next year.
And we do have a concern. I mean, we weren't certainly given this threat that the grant money's going to be gone, but this was part of the 2015 legislature that big grants were awarded to be spent in 2016. So we're coming up on the time where we have to start spending those funds. But again, it's commission purview how they want to move forward. I wanted you guys to know that I think we're okay in the 506 to move ahead. And Charlie, or Commissioner Gross's point is good, well taken. And any of our projects could have change orders too, just so everyone knows, on a $3 million project on 8th Street, a change order, even a small one, could be a significant dollar. So that's something to take into account and to think about critically. We spent a lot of time the last couple of days deciding, where we could go with the 506 to make this fit, and we think we can. But that's up to you guys.
I guess what I would say is we're 242,800 higher than the 2016 estimate. That's 2 years ago now. That was 2016. And I think it's presumptuous to say that if you take this architectural significance off, it's going to go down by $200,000 or $300,000. It may be a $50,000 savings. You just don't know. And how could you jeopardize grant funding? Because now, in order to save $200,000, you're going to spend $1 million of your own money, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense. The other thing, I would encourage the commission to add architectural features to every type of infrastructure you put in your community. It sets a community apart. Anyone can do, deck bridges and do it on the cheap. I think when you do that, that sets you apart as saying, we believe in our community, we're going to do something nice for our community. So I would just encourage you to vote yes, get this bridge done. It needs to be done.
How about a motion first?
I'll make a motion to move on with the Pine Street Bridge replacement as bid out.
Second.
Bid.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion?
I just want to encourage the commission, if you remember one thing about Commissioner Knopf, I want you to remember those words about beautifying our infrastructure, because that'll be something that people will appreciate in the future.
Anybody from the audience? Roll call, please.
Gross.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
No.
Mosier.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Ferdig.
Aye.
Mayor Hoffman.
Aye. Motion carried. That's our last item under new business. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn into zoning board of adjustments.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Roll call. Al, please.
Sarda.
Here.
Ferdig. Here. Gross.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Knopf.
Here.
Mybom.
Present.
Mosier.
Here.
Mayor Hoffman.
Here.
City Manager Nelson.
Here.
City Attorney Jan Herder.
Here.
We established a quorum in the zoning board of adjustment. We have the minutes before you of February 26th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. The minutes. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 3 is the Zoning Board of Adjustments variance request. This is the second reading and the public hearing for consideration of memorandum 18-48. The Zoning Board of Adjustment for public hearing to consider a variance. Dave, you want to start out?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. What we have tonight is a request for a variance that essentially constitutes two requests in one. One would be to extend into the rear yard, 25-foot required setback at the location, 7 feet to a point that would be 18 feet from the lot line. And the other would be to increase the lot coverage just slightly over the maximum 35% lot coverage allowed. The reason that the variance is being requested is so that the applicant can take a rear yard deck that currently doesn't count against either the rear yard setback or the lot coverage and enclose it. In 2013, some of you may remember we reviewed this very issue, and this address was the genesis of an ordinance change that the commission approved. We had a lot of requests for rear yard decks to get closer than 25 feet from the back property line. And so through discussion at the planning commission level and the city commission level, it was determined that a rear yard deck is essentially open space, and the purpose for your yard is to have open space. So we wouldn't have it count against it, against the requirements. Now, when we did that, we also said you can have a shade feature or a roof over your deck and still not have it count against the setback or lot coverage requirement. And then based on building code related issues, so we have another ordinance kind of come into play here. Any decks that are above 30 inches above grade are required to have railings. Well, there's different types of railings. You know, there's the basic open type of railings that you see that are fairly minimal, and then there's very nice ones, as Mr. Tessier did at his location. And so he did a very nice project with a rear yard deck that meets all the components of our current ordinance. And it's so nice, in fact, that he wants to request to put windows in it. Well, what that does when he proposes to do that is it triggers a change in classification from it being a rear yard deck to being a home addition. And thus the request for the variance as we see it here. What we've done in the past on these, just as on other variances like we did the first time when the deck was requested, is rather than granting variances one at a time as a special privilege, let's take a look at the ordinance and see if it's really doing what we want it to do, and maybe consider amending the ordinance to allow everybody to be able to do that rather than considering special privileges at specific locations. In staff's opinion and in the planning commission's opinion based on their vote, the ordinance is doing what it's supposed to be doing at this point. We addressed the community-wide fairness issue with the last amendment, so there couldn't really be an amendment considered at this time without affecting potentially the investment of other adjacent property owners. Somebody across the back lot line might not want the other house to get that close to them. So the only way to consider this for Mr. Tessier was with a variance request. Through very cordial discussions over a couple months, Mr. Tessier and I and other staff, packaged this variance request, and I was very upfront with him saying that based on our ordinance provisions, staff wouldn't have a way of recommending in favor of this, and he politely decided to proceed with the request, so that's where we're at today. We went through the Planning Commission discussion, and as mentioned earlier, they voted to recommend that the variance request be denied based on the determination that it's a special privilege request and not a hardship approaching confiscation of the use of property, which is by ordinance definition and by state law the criteria by which you should consider granting variances. With that, I will answer any questions the commission may have.
Any questions?
You talked about windows. How about screens? You know, is there at some point where you can have something that blocks wind or insects and it's not a building, or is it any type of enclosure?
So in the building code, if he were to hang drapes or something like that, there's no building permit required for that. It's the point where you start to restrict egress or frame objects. So if you were to put screens in it, to me, I assume that would mean there'd be framing involved in screening it. Those are really good questions, and those are the questions that staff wrangled with and the Planning Commission wrangled with also. You know, by definition, if he wants, his request is windows, and that constitutes an enclosure.
Any more questions? Audience? Yep, absolutely, Darwin.
And if I may, Mr. Tessier, they do have a copy of the pictures that you brought to the Planning Commission. So I included that in their packet this time, so they've got those.
Darwin Tessier, 2831 Mary Street, and I was hoping that those pictures had been distributed. Mm-hmm. First of all, I thank you for this opportunity to request a variance on our covered deck. As you can see, if you've got these pictures in front of you, it resembles our house and fits into our yard and neighborhood very well, makes it quite attractive. As attractive as this deck is, it is virtually unusable or only used minimally due to wind, rain, sleet, snow, insects, birds, and varmints. Yes, I've trapped a few varmints on the deck. This request is not to expand living space in our home. We do not desire to add heating, air conditioning, plumbing, or water service to this deck. Insofar as the percentage of the lot that is covered, and I know that Dave has got his figures 100% correct, we are not increasing it because the structure, as you can see, is sitting there. And it looks really nice. I think the minimum that your code says you have to have 6,000 square feet for a home lot. Our particular lot is 7,400 square feet. We've taken 192 square feet to put this porch on. So we're still leaving excessive amount of square feet in that situation. We live in a homeowners association comprised of 22 homes. Our association covenants and restrictions are on file with the Register of Deeds and are spelled out clearly. We have an architectural design committee required in our covenants and restrictions. And I want to just read a little bit from our covenants and restrictions. This is under section F, structural changes and additions. It is the obligation of the association members proposing any structural additions to homes and lawn sites within the association to submit documented plans to the Architectural Design Committee. Those structural changes may include, but not limited to, sidewalk extensions, deck changes, lawn garden beds, and etc. Considerations in approving or denying any proposed plan may include, but not limited to, qualities of workmanship, materials, and the harmony of color and exterior design with respect to the topography and finish grade and elevations. And item number 3, no building shall be erected, placed, or altered on any association lot until building plans have been submitted to and approved by the appointed Architectural Design Committee. The Architectural Design Committee is here with us tonight, and I'd just like to introduce them to you. Starting over next to my wife, Eileen Barras, is the north half of our twin home. She couldn't be any closer as a neighbor. Right across the street is Leah Smith. Across the street and down a few doors is Lorraine Slade. The Architectural Design Committee members are here tonight, and I've introduced them to you, and they've looked over our plans. They've made sure that everything we've done meets our covenants and ordinances. The developer to the west, the only site I haven't talked about, that's Sean Lyons, and he's going to build 3 single-family dwellings where we look out our backyard. So we will have a continuous 2 flower gardens and 2 lawns that hook together, and to me, it would almost give it a park-like appearance, but that's kind of beside the point. But Sean says he'd be happy to have us put some screen windows and a screen door on that place. But when I say screen windows, and as Mr. Koff has mentioned, you almost have to have the windows if you're going to try to keep the wind, sleet, hail, and rain out. So we're talking about a combination screen and window that we'd like to see in there. Mr. Lyons also said that he'd love to see it, and he would be happy to finish the job for us. So that's all of our neighbors on all sides and up and down the street and wherever else we might want to look. So in conclusion, my wife and I would appreciate it if you could approve a variance so that we might be able to get more utilization out of that deck. And I thank you for your time and consideration, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Darwin. Any question?
Well, I think what you got here is, looks great. And to be honest, on a personal level, I'm not seeing anything different by enclosing it. But unfortunately, we can't sit up here and make decisions on personal levels. What concerns me the most is offering or giving you a variance will open the door for somebody that's not as visual, not as compliant, and that would be hard for me. I mean, what you got here is great, but the next person that comes might not be as good as a project. But by approving it to you, we'd almost have to do it there too. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, Mr. Ferdig, I know where you're coming from. I thought a little bit about that, and I think, first of all, you're not going to have that many people that are going to want to jump through the various hoops that you have the kind of support that you need, and I would agree. We sure don't want a bunch of tacky-looking porches, patios, whatever. But I think once in a while we have to look at the individual case and say, now, wait a minute. Would this make sense? And would we have a ton of people that would want to go through all these hoops in order to get this done? I don't think there are that many, but I'm just, of course, you know where I'm coming from, so that's my response to that.
Any more questions?
Do you have a ceiling fan
Yes,
in this deck?
Yep.
I
should be in the picture.
I wasn't seeing it.
And I'll tell you, the birds just love to build nests on the ceiling fan. Well, don't they have that one, David?
Yeah, I can't see the fan. I can see.
It's in the middle. Oh, okay. It's in the middle of the one where you see the horses with the bird's nest also.
So I would just a quick add. I'm inclined to agree with Commissioner Fertig on this, and I would just say that my house we have a deck and it has removable screens that we can take out and leave them in there as mosquitoes, whatever. But we actually utilize the fan as well, and I think it's in the reverse. So even on windy days, like 15, 20 miles an hour, you crank that up, and it feels pretty good in there. You can eat food with your family, and you have a beautiful property here. And I'd hope you'd look into that as an option. Maybe go down the path considering doing removable screen windows. So again, I'm inclined to agree with Commissioner Fertig on this.
Any more questions?
A question, our code, city code, it's 2711-2, which, where we get variances, and that's just a partial section of the code. What are the other, is like there a subsection 1 that says you can have a variance under this circumstance? Because this shows me a subsection 2, and I'm assuming there's a subsection 1.
So I cut and pasted that one out of there because that's the section that discusses when essentially a variance should be granted or the criteria for granting a variance. So I can't quote you that subsection off the top of my head. I would imagine it is a totally separate subject though, because the code doesn't discuss reasons for granting a variance similar to like it does reasons for granting a conditional use permit, for example, where there's a list of if you have a daycare, if it meets these 5 criteria, you grant it. The variances aren't that way. Variances, there aren't provisions for granting variances other than undue hardship, and then it's your job or your staff's job to try and define what undue hardship is. But the general definition is approaching confiscation of the use of property as distinguished from special privilege.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, I just don't see how that standard is met. And that's the problem, is when you have a standard, you have to go by it. I think we'd have to change the code before we could allow this to go forward. And I don't know whether that's difficult to do, unless you want to add screen rooms or something. But as it sits right now, I don't see a hardship has been met. And if that's what the rule is, I think we're bound by that.
Any more questions or discussion? Anybody from the audience also want to speak? Go ahead and step up to there's millions of people at home watching.
I'd like to ask people that know, maybe Mr. Mulder, what is a hardship?
A confiscation of the use of property. In other words, you wouldn't be able to continue to occupy the property or use it for its originally permitted intended purpose unless you were granted the variance. So if some reconstruction needed to occur to ensure that the property could continue its use, that would be a hardship. That's still a very general definition. If there was some property that had value and you were taking value away from it by not allowing it to be used for its intended purpose, in other words, a residential lot that because of topography or something else couldn't be used for residential purposes without a variance, then that would be a reason to grant a variance. Say there's a steep hill or a cliff and they needed to build closer to that cliff even though two-dimensionally it would put them less than 25 feet from the back lot line. If that was the only way to allow that property to be used as a residential location, that would be a confiscation of a use of property. The property in this instance is already being used as residential property. There's no reduction in its ability to be used without that's being considered as a part of the variance request.
Any more questions? If not, I will entertain a motion to deny or approve this variance.
Do we need a motion to deny? We can't act on it? Or do you want
David,
a motion?
I think you want a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to deny the request.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? The motion is to deny the request. Roll call, please.
Johnson.
Aye.
Knopf.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Mosier.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Fertig.
Aye.
Gross. Mayor Hoffman.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you for
I would just comment, Mayor, that David and his staff have been really a nice group to work with. And I said from day one, we'd have to agree to disagree, but they could not have been more accommodating. So We thank you for your time and
Hey.
consideration.
Thank you very much, Darwin. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn and reconvene as the Board of City Commissioners. Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Now reconvene. Roll call, please.
Sarda. Here. Burdick. Here. Gross. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Knopf.
Here.
Mybom.
Here.
Moser.
Here.
Mayor Hoffner.
Here.
City Manager Nelson.
Here.
City Attorney Denver.
Here.
We have a quorum. I'll entertain, any other business? If not, I'll entertain a motion to, let's get reconvene again.
Motion to adjourn?
Adjourn, okay.
So
Motion
moved.
to adjourn. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.